Happened next? Let's dig in the story.
3 years before that nuke, there was someone who knew a catastrophe was coming. So, that person started preparing for the end of the world in advance, planning to survive whatever was coming. Due to monsters having started to ravage the Earth, he knew that an irreversible end was on the horizon, and it was a topic of common conversation everywhere at that time. However, only two groups really prepared for the crisis. One was the ultra-wealthy elite, so rich they could buy anything they wanted, always focused on their comfort. On the other hand, there were people with only a limited amount of cash, so their main strategy was to gather knowledge on how to survive. And our protagonist in this story, Park Q, is definitely part of the latter group. So, first things first, he sold off everything he owned and dove headfirst into survival guides like they were the latest binge-worthy show. The first thing he figured out is how to choose the perfect spot for his shelter. After a lot of head-scratching and map poking, he grabbed his marker and highlighted a spot that seemed just right for his bunker. Now, Park had a few must-haves for his dream bunker location. It had to be in a place so sparsely populated that even a herd of lost tourists wouldn't stumble across it. But it still needed to be close enough to the city, so he wouldn't feel like he was living on the moon. It also had to be defensible in case of emergencies. And the third, and probably most crucial factor, was his wallet. With his cash flow resembling a trickle rather than a river, splurging on prime real estate was out of the question. So, he had to get creative and stick to a tight budget. In the end, Parky Q chose a secluded forest near the Air Force Base in the suburbs of Seoul. He bought land that was adjacent to a grumpy old farmer's plot, and this stingy old guy went by the name Mr. Kim. With his spot picked out, Parky hired a construction crew who, let's be honest, looked more like a gang of streetwise misfits than actual workers. Nonetheless, Parky managed to gather all the equipment for the job and promised these guys to help them in work. At first, they weren't thrilled about having him join in the work, but after a few drink parties and some good-natured bonding, they ended up getting along just fine. The plan was ready to roll, or so Parky thought. That was until Mr. Kim decided to play the role of the neighborhood grump. He scolded the crew for littering and making noise, and even had the nerve to question whether our boy Park had the proper permits to start construction. Parky had no idea what Mr. Kim's deal was, but he pressed on with the construction anyway. Unfortunately, the old man was like a stubborn speed bump on their plans. Some of the construction workers wanted to take the old man out by force, but Parky told them to cool their jets. He figured he'd handle Mr. Kim himself if things came to a head. Days went by, and Parky's patience was wearing thin. Then one day, while strolling around, he saw something interesting. People from the city were giving Mr. Kim a hard time. It turned out that Mr. Kim's son was throwing a fit because his father had given away priceless land to his daughter. The son was so mad he was practically frothing at the mouth. He yelled at his old man to sell the useless land and even tried to slap him around a bit. That's when Parky stepped in. He gave the greedy son a look that could freeze the hell, and the son decided it was a good time to make a hasty exit. After a few more threats, he sped off in his car, leaving our boy and Mr. Kim to figure things out. After that, both of them sat down for a chat. During their conversation, we learned that our boy's parents had already passed away in an accident. Park advised the old man to just sell his land since it's too much for him to manage alone. But Kim remains quiet for a moment, then reveals that the land he gave to his daughter is also considered worthless, just like the plot Park is working on. But, as fate would have it, a 10-lane road ends up being built right in front of it. And as for this land, he can't sell his current land because it holds special memories of someone dear to him, and he doesn't want to let those memories slip away. After that, he leaves, and for some reason, he never interferes with our boy's construction again. Days pass, and as the seasons change, the day of catastrophe arrives, hitting Seoul unexpectedly. Even out in the countryside, Park is caught off guard by the blast. As the deafening roar fills the heavens and the delayed air raid sirens announce the end of the world, Park realizes that the nightmare is now a reality. As he runs to his bunker, completely out of breath, Mr. Kim comes rushing after him and begs our boy to help locate his son, who is stuck in Seoul. Park has already checked the news on his laptop and has to break the devastating news to Mr. Kim. His son is already gone. Mr. Kim falls silent, unsure of what to do next. Parky tells him that another attack is likely coming soon and urges him to take shelter in the bunker. But the old man simply shakes his head and says he's not leaving his home. He turns and walks away, leaving Park to prepare for the impending disaster. The horns blare once again, and the catastrophe hits the city without warning. Inside the bunker, Park receives a phone call from a worker named Wang-Soo Ki. But as he turns on his computer, he sees the man outside with a sharp axe in hand, one of the workers Park had been with. The man seems to be trying to break into the bunker, fighting against Parky to claim it for himself. We then also discover that Mr. Kim took his own life before the catastrophe struck. On the other hand, determined to protect his shelter, Park grabs his axe and prepares to deal with the intruder at his doorstep. He knows that anyone who survived this apocalypse is now a potential enemy. Before we see the showdown between Park and his uninvited enemy, the scene shifts to the past, when Park was still preparing his bunker. One day, Parky goes hunting with Mr. Kim. After taking down their target, the old man proudly boasts about his days in the special forces and the commendations he received for his marksmanship. That's when our boy learns that this old man used to be part of the defense forces, and that hunting rifle he's carrying could be pretty handy in an apocalypse. But he knows it's not enough, which is why he's got his eye on the nearby Air Force base. You see, both Korean and American soldiers are stationed at this base, including hunters who specialize in taking down large monsters. This place is a treasure trove of stockpiled weapons, which is just perfect for surviving an apocalypse. So, Parky has a simple plan in mind. Once the nuke goes off, he'll put on some protective clothing and loot the supplies and weapons from the Air Force base. But before he can go ahead with this plan, he meets Wang-Soo Kim, one of the workers who helped build his bunker. Wang-Soo offers to sell our boy some guns. Turns out, Wang-Soo used to be a gangster in the Chinese mafia. He quit the mafia life and came to Korea to earn some honest money as a laborer. Wang-Soo reveals that many people had died due to attacks by monsters, and nowadays, a lot of people have been spending money on building shelters. Since Parky already has his bunker ready, he knows weapons are the last piece of the puzzle for his future safety. Parky thinks it over and eventually decides to buy some bad boys for himself. When the day of the transaction arrived, we learned that Parky hired a private investigation firm to look into Wang-Soo. It turns out Wang-Soo wasn't just part of any gang, he was with the Shanghai Triads, and he's using his old connections to bring in the goods. The gangster finally shows up and tells Parky to hang tight while his crew brings in the goods. As they wait, Wang-Soo reveals that he has a daughter who just turned 7. He laughs, admitting he has no idea where she gets her troublemaker streak from. And she's quite a handful. Just as they're chatting, the delivery truck arrives. A man unloads a box of weapons, and our boy sees they've got 3 types of 56 assault rifles, 300 rounds of 7.62 ammo, and 3 magazines. Parky grabs one of the rifles and instantly knows these are the real deal. The quality is top-notch, just what he needs to be ready for whatever's coming next. The delivery guys hop back into the truck, and Wang-Soo mutters something in Chinese to his crew, which flies right over Parky's head. The fat man then turns toward our boy, and with a creepy look, he walks up to Parky and asks if he's going to be living alone in that big bunker. The way he says it, Parky can tell he's up to something shady, but our boy doesn't get intimidated and simply replies, "Yes, I'm definitely going to live alone." He then further asks the fatty if he has any problems with that. Park can sense something fishy, so he discreetly reaches into his coat and grabs the weapon he's keeping hidden. He asks the hefty guy if he's got any issues with that, but the hefty guy just laughs it off, saying there's nothing wrong. He then tells the hefty guy he's welcome to crash in the bunker if he wants, since he knows exactly where it is located. Wang-Soo just starts walking away, saying there's no need for that. He's heading China to see his daughter once this job is done and probably won't be coming back. He reassures Parky that he'll still get the ammo and magazines once the payment clears. With that, Wang-Soo speeds off. In the present moment, as the horns blare, Park gets a phone call from Wang-Soo. He looks outside and sees Fatty standing by the bunker with an axe in hand. Parky is pretty sure that with the nuking starting, Wang-Soo needs weapons and a place to stay, which makes this bunker the perfect safe haven for him. He eventually picks up the fatty's call, and the greedy hefty guy tells him he's brought the magazines and ammo and has been waiting outside. Hearing this, Parky grabs his axe and heads confidently toward the bunker entrance. Since his enemy has come alone, our boy figures he can handle him easily. When they're face to face, Wang-Soo doesn't waste any time and lunges at Parky with his axe. But my guy sidesteps the attack and swings his own axe back in retaliation. That one swing was enough to cut the fatty's throat like a pig, and with a second hit to the head, Wang-Soo turned into a bloody mess. Wang-Soo starts begging for mercy, grabbing Parky's legs and pleading to be let live. But my guy makes it clear that's not happening. Even if he spared Wang-Soo now, the guy would just bleed out until he's out cold. Wang-Soo, seeing the writing on the wall, gives Parky the green light to finish him off. And just like that, Wang-Soo's life comes to an end. Suddenly, Wang-Soo's phone rings. Parky quickly squats down, rummages through Fatty's pockets, and pulls out the phone. It's a call from Wang-Soo's daughter in China. He reads her message, where she's asking her dad to come home soon. But before Parky can dwell on the emotions, the sirens start blaring again, and he has no time for pointless feelings. After 29 days of the nuking, radiation levels are through the roof. Parky heads to the Air Force base in search of weapons. When he steps inside, he's blown away by the sheer amount of weapons, enough to arm a private army. As he looks around and sees the burned bodies, he realizes that even if Wang-Soo had survived to see this day, he wouldn't have lived long enough to reunite with his daughter, because no one can survive this messed up place. In the next scene, Parky is fiddling with some limited materials, trying to make toys. He's watching a broadcast on his computer to guide him through it. Turns out, the video isn't from before the war, but was uploaded to an online community called Viva Apocalypse. A rich tech guy developed a satellite network called Galaxy Link, allowing survivors to connect and interact over the internet. As the video wraps up, Parky's attempt at making a toy sheep isn't quite hitting the mark, and it's starting to creep him out. It's been a year since the nuclear war began. The nukes and airstrikes have stopped, but now there's a surge of monsters in various places, and the government is clueless about how to handle it. Normalcy feels like a distant dream, and with the rising number of refugees, bunkers are being attacked more and more. The owners of these bunkers are dropping offline daily, likely due to refugee attacks. Everyone's started to turn on each other, and no one wants anyone near their bunker anymore. The sense of community has dissolved into a mess of distrust and fear. Parky also made a smart move by blocking a guy known as Defender. This guy had recently earned the title of Human Hunter in the community. After the war began, he started posting evidence of his brutal killings, not for fun, but to serve as a warning to anyone who dared to enter his territory. When Park eventually unblocked Defender, he discovered that this guy was a serial killer, hunting down anyone nearby. Around the same time, Parky received devastating news. His favorite user, Non337, who used to post videos of making toys for his kids, had also been added to the list of long-term offline users. It's been almost 395 days since the apocalypse started, and winter has set in. People are reaching out to check if anyone's still alive, but it seems there are more offline members than active ones now. Park has gradually come to accept the fact that many are gone, and he's resigned to the possibility that he might be next. While scouting outside, he spots a few people near his bunker. Chief Hong and the crew who helped build the bunker have turned into raiders, and they've come to pay a visit to their old client. Looks like this is going to be one deadly after-sales service, and Parky is ready to handle these guys with the right payment. Park heads over to one of the drawers and opens it, revealing a stash of weapons and supplies. Among all the options, he picks up one of the most traditional weapons and waits for the raiders in the darkness. The next day, the goons outside are prepped for action, but they're confused to find the bunker doors open. One of them suspects it might be a trap, so Chief Hong tells one of his lackeys to investigate. Two lackeys advance cautiously, and soon discover boxes of cigarettes. The lackey quickly reports back, noting something feels off. Chief Hong asks if they can smell any rotting corpses inside. The lackey starts sniffing around, claiming he doesn't detect anything of the sort, but Chief Hong insists they continue searching carefully. Just then, Parky drops from above and lands a powerful kick on one of the goons, sending him crashing into his own comrade. The other goon quickly starts firing bursts, but Parky quickly throws his trusty axe with precision, hitting the trigger-happy soldier squarely in the face. Before the remaining thug can react, Parky delivers a solid smackdown with his feet, then retrieves the axe. With no sense of sympathy, he raises it high and mercilessly brings it down on his adversary. Meanwhile, Chief Hong is still outside, shouting to see if anyone is in the bunker. Hearing the commotion, Parky decides to step outside. Outside the bunker, the bearded goon, worried about the lack of response from his comrades, decides to get inside. But before he can enter, Chief Hong tells his buddy to use tear gas bomb to flush out our boy outside. On the other hand, Parky isn't surprised by Chief Hong's clever tactic. But still, as resourceful as the chief might be, Parky is always one step ahead. Parky quickly slams the bunker door shut, leaving the thugs outside bewildered. Chief Hong, realizing that tear gas might be the key to flushing Parky out, decides to search for the ventilation system. Since he helped build the bunker, he knows that if they can drop tear gas through the vents, it will be game over for Parky. However, Parky has anticipated this move. He grabs his rifle and heads toward a hidden passageway, a secret route he constructed himself after the initial construction was completed. As Parky emerges from the other side, he silently chuckles to himself, knowing that these fools have unwittingly walked into their own death. Meanwhile, the goons are busy tossing tear gas canisters into the bunker, but they're met with silence. Just as they prepare to launch another round, Parky opens fire with a barrage of bullets, taking out the bearded goon with a precise headshot. Seeing his friends dropping down like flies, Chief quickly raises his hands and surrenders before a bullet drills a hole in his head. Our boy quickly asks how many of them are still around, and Chief admits he's the last one alive. But instead of easing up, our guy just presses the barrel of the gun against Chief's head. Chief freaks out after seeing that thick barrel, insisting he's telling the truth and that there were a total of 5 people, including him. After a while, Parky makes this guy haul his friends' dead bodies into the truck. That's when Parky spots something and reaches into the truck to grab a sheep toy. It's probably made by someone whose toy-making videos Parky used to watch. It doesn't take Parky long to realize that these thugs must have killed that toy maker. He slams Chief with the gun and demands he starts talking, and quickly asks what the hell happened to the owner of the doll. Chief tries to brush it off as a misunderstanding, but Park's not in the mood for excuses. He smacks Chief again, hard. Terrified, Chief starts babbling like a cornered animal, saying he didn't kill anyone. He insists there was only one guy there, and that they didn't even kill him. He was already dead by the time they arrived. Park tells Chief to take him to the spot, and after a tense 30-minute drive, they finally arrive at Anon 337's bunker. There he is, lying dead on the floor, clearly the work of someone named Defender. The shot that took Anon down keeps echoing in Park's mind. He's pretty sure Defender is behind this mess. As Park looks at the dead body, he remembers Defender's posts about his victims. He plans to use all that information to figure out how these people were tortured, why they were targeted, and what kind of attitude Defender had toward them. Chief then raises his hands again, asking if he can leave now that he's done what he was told. But Parky just aims his gun at him, causing Chief to recoil in fear. He quickly starts babbling about having kids and how they'll be left fatherless if anything happens to him. But Park makes it clear he's not letting any raiders live, especially since they know where his home is. As for Chief's sob story about kids, Park tells him it's one of the lamest excuses he's heard a million times before. With that, he pulls the trigger, adding another corpse to the pile before heading out. After months of hardcore winter, the warm days finally arrive. For someone living in a bunker, these days are a special treat. You can forget about worries like fuel consumption and just bask in the sun, making every breath feel like heaven. But of course, relaxing in a post-apocalyptic world still comes with its risks, and Park can clearly see a drone hovering around, keeping watch. There's also a buzz about a user named Dongtan Mom, who lives solo in a high-rise building in southern Gyeonggi province. He reveals that he is being watched by a drone sent by the raiders. Dongtan Mom keeps a survival journal documenting all the raider activity, and since he can't really defend himself, he made a threat in his postscript saying he'd consider taking out the nearby Dongtan area if the raiders tried to mess with him. This post not only shared info on the raiders, but also pissed off the nearby Dongtan survivors and raiders. For Parky, the post was a bit worrying. You see, the raiders' tactics are changing, and they might have accounts on the forum, which means information that could save someone might also put others at risk. That day, everyone learned a tough lesson. If you can't fight back, you won't survive. So, people started forming their own communities to gear up and protect themselves against the enemy. Parky is a bit of an anomaly among everyone. His thoughts are pretty different from the rest. He figures you might be able to stop raiders once or twice, but the real issue is human selfishness. Groups tend to make you more noticeable, and it's all over once a large force shows up. Armed conflict should be a last resort. Staying hidden is what really matters. In that sense, the area Parky picked is perfect. It's a desolate piece of land where raiders and wanderers have no reason to hang around. Plus, there's a pack of mutated wild dogs that keeps most people away. No one would dare set foot here out of fear. In the nearest downtown area, there were rumors of radioactive zombies, but a survivor apparently dealt with them using a sniper rifle. Parky knows that no enemy force lasts forever. Take these raiders, for example. They're keeping an eye on him with that drone while he's just chilling under the sun, soaking up the sweet sunlight. But then, Parky suddenly vanishes into thin air. The raiders have no clue where he went. As they frantically search the area, they spot another person on the drone's feed near the military area. This woman appears to be American. One of the raiders excitedly tells his buddies they've found their prey, but chaos quickly erupts. The wild mutated dogs in the area start attacking, and the raiders become the prey. In the commotion, one of the raiders in a car hits the gas pedal hard, leaving their friends behind. Suddenly, a corpse falls onto their windshield, obscuring their view. They crash into a nearby light pole, and the impact leaves both raiders in a bloody mess. As the monster outside peers into the wreckage, it takes a vicious bite out of one of their heads. It's been the 458th day of the apocalypse, and news about the raiders of Gyeonggi province has gone viral. This news is a week old already, and it was around the time Dongtan Mom's post had just started to fade from everyone's memory. Then Dongtan Mom posted again, and it's a real surprise to our boy Parky. At first, he thought it was just another attention-seeking stunt. In the post, Dongtan Mom revealed that he's actually in danger this time. He admitted that he lives in Gwangyo, not Dongtan, and that there are at least 5 people at his door. He's begging anyone nearby for help and says that if no one comes to save him, he's going to blow the entire place up. Most people thought it was just another troll post because Dongtan Mom had already been labeled as an attention seeker in the community. No one responded to his plea. When the raiders finally broke into his room, Dongtan Mom was in tears and, true to his word, blew up the entire place. The serial killer defender also posted about a massive explosion near Gwangyo, wondering if that annoying attention seeker, Dongtan Mom, is finally dead for real this time. Parky sees this post and figures Defender might be hiding around Gwangyo. He takes note of this, but he's also got another problem. A soldier mommy who took down his drone with a single shot. Parky heads outside to check out the area near his bunker. He recalls when that sniper lady took out one of the raiders with just one shot. Seems like this lunatic sniper has turned our boy's neighborhood her hideout. While inspecting the scene, Parky notices a puncture where the missed bullet hit. Given the distance between the dead body and the bullet mark, it's clear she didn't give the raider much time to run, and it feels as if she was shooting out of necessity, not choice. The reason Parky is visiting this new neighborhood, where he's never interacted with anyone before, is because of the soldier lady there. Her hair, uniform, and weapon all point to her being an American soldier. When the war started, the US intercepted most of the nukes headed their way to show off their strength as a mighty nation. In reality, they had their own problems, so they recalled all their overseas troops and focused their firepower on stopping the monsters coming through the fissure which appeared in the sky. Parky's worried that if this soldier were to try to reclaim the Air Force base and start searching the area, it could cause him some serious problems. He'd rather avoid a fight with a trained soldier, but he's prepared to defend his territory fiercely if she tries to invade. He'll never let anyone threaten his home. Parky kept an eye on her daily and figured out her routine. He noticed that the gunshots usually stop around the same time every day, which he figured must be when she goes to sleep. This makes it the perfect time for him to approach the building. The main entrance is barricaded, so the quietest way in is to infiltrate from a middle floor of the building next door. After leaping through the neighboring building, Parky hooks himself onto a balcony. If his grip slips, he's a goner. So he takes a deep breath and makes the jump, landing safely on the floor. He quickly pulls out his gun and moves cautiously through the building. He doesn't spot anyone around, but he stays alert as he continues his way up. Parky cautiously opens the gate and sees someone under the blankets. He figures she must be sleeping, but turns out he's wrong. The woman is standing right behind him, and she quickly tells him in English to lower his weapon. Parky raises his hands, realizing she was a step ahead and had been waiting to ambush him. As he contemplates his next move, she reminds him again to drop his weapon. Parky quickly complies, knowing from the sound of her voice that she must be holding a long-barreled weapon, not a handgun. As soon as he drops his weapon, he turns and retaliates. The woman starts firing, but Parky ducks down with godly energy and grabs the barrel of her gun and deflects the bullets, causing them to ricochet off random objects. He then swings his knee and lands a brutal hit to her leg, cracking her bones, which leaves her growling in pain. She collapses to the ground, trying to reach for the weapon, but Parky kicks her hard in the thighs and demands she stop moving. Parky doesn't forget to apologize for being so harsh with a foreigner, but he explains he had no choice. He initially just wanted to scout out how many people were working with her and then leave. But when he stumbled upon her weapon storage, he realized it would be a huge problem if raiders got their hands on it. He reminds her that she should have just kept a low profile if she wanted to survive, but she brought this on herself. Suddenly, the woman shouts for someone to stay back. As Park turns around, he sees another girl, a child who appears to be the woman's daughter. Well, Park finds it hard to believe there's a kid involved. The woman, on the other hand, grits her teeth in agitation and quickly retaliates, making Park recoil in surprise. Just as the woman sits on her feet, Parky quickly aims his gun at her before she makes a move. But in a surprising turn of events, she completely ignores him and dashes toward her daughter, hugging her tightly. Parky almost expected her to grab that weapon and start shooting, but it turns out she's not a bloodthirsty lunatic after all. It becomes clear she's just desperate and overwhelmed, stuck in a foreign land and trying to protect her daughter. Parky kicks the gun from her hands and decides to speak in English, telling her that he lives nearby and advising her not to shoot around if she wants to survive. It seems the little girl understands Korean more or less, so she translates Parky's words to her mother. Then, she looks up at Parky and asks if he has any medicine. The woman lifts her pant leg to reveal a wound, and Parky finally understands why her movements were so slow. He tosses her some anti-inflammatory drugs, and tells her that this medicine is compensation for invading her territory. The woman looks at the medicine and says she needs something stronger to make her forget her pain, but Park tells her that this is all he has got, and she should not really be on drugs at all. He then points to the girl and asks if she can actually speak Korean. From that day on, Parky starts giving the mother and daughter skimmed milk and painkillers at a rendezvous point. Over the past few days, the sound of gunfire has noticeably increased. Judging by the one-sided shooting, it doesn't seem like a battle, but rather a high frequency of gunshots. The way she desperately asked for the drugs made Parky sure she's reached her breaking point. He suspects those gunshots might not be about keeping invaders away, but a sign of the madness she's enduring. Suddenly, Parky sees a flash of light from the building where the mother and daughter are staying. It looks like Morse code, and he figures it's an invitation to meet. He heads over and soon finds the girl, who tells him her mother has fallen sick. When Parky follows her up to the building, he's hit with an unexpected sight. The woman has decked out the place with all kinds of stereotypical American stuff. Looks like to fight off her pain, she's found some comfort in these items. When Parky checks her wound, he realizes she's been constantly attacked by raiders drawn to the gunfire, which kept her from properly treating her leg. After Parky patches up the mother, she and her daughter quickly hug each other. The mother reveals that she wants to stay in touch with friends and family, but is so far from home that even thinking about chatting with them feels impossible. Tears fall as her daughter tries to offer comfort, and the woman asks Parky if he has the strong drugs she needs. Parky stays silent, reflecting on how she looks like a vulnerable mother desperately trying to protect her child. He bluntly refuses to give her any drugs, telling her that escaping reality won't help. Instead, he offers to help by reducing the number of problems she's dealing with, but he'll need to borrow some of her weapons. One fateful day when rain is pouring heavily, Parky chooses this day to take action. The rain lowers visibility, and the cold weather makes people huddle together, making them easier targets. He takes a look at the raiders' weapons and sees they have a lot of RPG rounds and a numerical advantage. But Parky is not stressing it, and before anyone can react, he fires an RPG missile, taking out a man with a single shot. Panic erupts among the raiders as they scatter, desperately running for their lives. Parky takes advantage of the chaos, shooting them down left and right like a madman, turning their once happy night into a bloody, chaotic mess. He keeps up the relentless shooting until someone finally returns fire. Thankfully, the bullet whizzes past his belly without even grazing him. As the raiders start bombarding the area with bullets, Parky quickly vanishes. They're completely clueless about what's going on, thinking they're being ambushed by many people, when in reality, just one person is taking them apart. Then bam, another soldier's down, and soon after, another one takes a bullet right to the face. Parky steps out of the shadows and tells the scared raider that while light might seem safe, it actually makes everyone an easy target. With his axe ready, he moves in, and the guy just tumbles over. As he's staring down his own death, Parky swings the axe and sends him off to wherever he deserves. After cleaning up the raiders, Parky invites the woman and her daughter to his bunker. The curious girl asks why the toilet's sitting out in the open, which gets Parky a bit riled up, who simply tells her to stick close to her mom. But the girl keeps poking around the drawers, and that really gets on Parky's nerves. Nonetheless, once he's patched up her leg, he tells her he followed the video instructions, so she should be good to go now. But even after getting treatment, the lady still feels uneasy. Parky can tell she's still hurting. While he's patched up her physical wounds, there's no easy fix for a broken heart. That's when his eyes land on his laptop, and he remembers there's one thing he can do to help her heal emotionally. You see, he's got the social media of this apocalyptic era, and he tells her to check it out. The lady asks what it is, and if it's even connected to the outside world. Parky explains it's the Viva Apocalypse English forum, and assures her it is indeed connected. She quickly starts typing, and when she gets a response back, she lights up with joy at finally talking to someone American. It's a small but meaningful connection for her. As time goes by, they hit the second Christmas after the apocalypse. A former game developer has created a hit tree decorating game. Parky's tree is empty because he's not very well known, but the trees of more popular users are decked out with comments and decorations. The tree we see now belongs to Defender, and everyone in the comments is calling him a cold-blooded murderer. This only puts a faint smile on Parky's face. Suddenly we hear the voice of that little girl trying to contact our boy through a walkie-talkie. The girl reveals that her mother, Rebecca, is sleeping, and she wants to borrow Parky's laptop later to count down to the new year with people in America. Earlier, when Rebecca and Sue first visited, they shared their names. Rebecca introduced herself and her daughter Sue. When they asked our boy about his name, he did not give away his Korean name and told them to call him Skeleton because he would rather avoid mispronunciations by Americans. Since that day, Sue has been calling him Skeleton. When she wishes him a Merry Christmas, he feels a warm glow and responds with the same enthusiastic Merry Christmas, wishing them safety. As Parky looks at his empty tree, the system announces that an ornament has been added by someone named John Neenan. This name rings a bell for him, which surprises him because he didn't expect to see it again. Before we dive deeper into this, let's rewind about 4 years when our hero has just started making his bunker. Back then, Parky learned about the internet community of doomsday enthusiasts known as Viva Apocalypse. It operated through a dedicated satellite server, accepting all kinds of information about the apocalypse, even illegal stuff. Anonymous users from around the world contributed to it, making it the largest apocalypse forum, or so Parky was told. He now regrets spending money to join this community, as there's nothing worthwhile other than watching a bunch of wealthy users throwing money around. The only reason Parky joined the community was because he didn't know where to start with his apocalypse preparations, and he now regrets not investing that money into his bunkers instead. Just as he's looking around, something catches his attention. It's the username John Neenan, and this is the first time he encountered this user who provided valuable information on the use of dummy bunkers. The benefits of these bunkers for long-term survival are huge. You can connect them with your main bunker for surveillance, use them to engage potential intruders, and even rig them with C4 to handle any break-ins with a simple press of a button. The more Parky dives into John Neenan's posts, the more he finds them useful. The survival philosophy this man shares aligns closely with Parky's own thoughts, and it's clear that Neenan's thinking is even more advanced. Parky's curiosity about John Neenan just reaches its peak, and he digs deeper to uncover his identity. He discovers that John Neenan's emergence was like a new star igniting the community, known for his exceptional insights across various fields. There were plenty of speculations about who he really was, but Neenan eventually responded in a formal manner, where Neenan showed his hunter's license card. You might also be curious about these people known as hunters. Well, a decade ago, strange phenomena called fissures appeared around the world, bringing monsters through. To combat this, world governments established branches to handle the threat, and these specialists were known as hunters. It looks like our boy was also part of this hunter team, which explains his exceptional combat skills and why he's not just some random high schooler, although it is just my speculation. You see, the identities of top-ranking hunters were considered state secrets, and they're elite professionals with serious qualifications. From John Neenan's license, Parky can tell he's not at that top level, but his posts have earned him credibility with a wealth of knowledge rivaling that of professionals. As Neenan gained popularity and influence, he also attracted some haters who tried to undermine his posts. Despite their weak attempts, Neenan's reputation remained intact. Unexpectedly, John Neenan responded to the trolls, which shocked Parky. When Neenan revealed his face, it caused a major backlash, and everyone turned against him. It turned out he was a D-rank hunter, the lowest rank for a hunter, which was a significant letdown for those who had built him up as an elite figure. Parky can't figure out why John Neenan had to reveal his face. He could have kept posting anonymously, but John didn't stop there. He continued sharing information and even set up an offline meetup. On the day of the meetup, Parky also went to the designated place, where John Neenan greeted everyone with a warm smile and revealed his real name, Sang Hyo-gu, and he is currently working as a hunter. At the meetup, 10 people showed up, including Parky. John Neenan, who was on a diet, told the waitress to serve food for 9 people. However, the waitress insisted he had to eat if he was sitting there, so he ended up with 10 servings. When the food arrived, everyone had a good time. Despite his diet claims, John Neenan ate and drank as if he hadn't had a proper meal in days. It wasn't long before the older and wealthier attendees left with disappointed faces, probably because of his lack of professionalism. As Parky sits there, the blonde starts talking, saying there's going to be a war soon, and China is likely to start it. He explains that there are too many fissures for the world to handle right now, along with a lot of internal conflict. The higher-ups are saying it's out of control, Seems like our boy is just plain disappointed to hear this, because the information John Nennan shared was something people could have figured out even if they weren't hunters, and it was almost half a year behind. The blonde then asks everyone to introduce themselves. Parky introduces himself as Skeleton. When the blonde asks about Parky's progress on bunker construction, our boy explains that he's run into some trouble and is finding it hard to get a trustworthy company to install a fuel tank. The blonde agrees, saying it's true and hard to find a reliable one. He admits he can't think of anyone off the top of his head either. Parky didn't expect him to know anyone, given his lack of skills and connections. But Parky is shocked when the blonde offers to help look into it for him. John confidently declared that he could find someone to help with the fuel tank issue if he made a few calls. He quickly dialed a number and reached out to his boss, asking if they knew anyone who worked with fuel tanks. Sure enough, Park found himself with fuel tanks installed in his bunker, all thanks to John's unexpected help. Despite the terrible first impression, Park was surprised to find John to be quite a useful guy. With only 401 days left before the apocalypse began, John's offline meetups continued to grow, attracting larger crowds. The last meetup Park attended had around 90 people, but as the numbers increased, the conversations became less relevant, so Park decided to stop attending. However, John took Park aside for a private chat before our boy could leave. After much effort, the blonde finally asked, "Are you a hunter by any chance?" He revealed that he had seen our boy somewhere before and was curious if he might be a hunter. At first, Parky decides to dance around the question, but eventually he confirms that he's a hunter. As soon as John Nennan hears this, he vanishes without saying a word. The crowd starts gathering around John, reminding him that even reporters are waiting to interview him. As they're trying to push him in, the reporter shows up, and the whole crowd shuffles John inside with them. Parky watches John disappear with the crowd, and this is the last time he'll see him in person. After that, John's popularity explodes. He becomes a big deal on shows as a doomsday expert, and even starts his own consulting agency for doomsday preparations. Viva Apocalypse was key to his success, and he became a prominent figure in the community, with many treating him like a guru. Owen Ninan's fame came with its own set of problems. Despite his rising popularity, he faced intense scrutiny from the forum's armchair detectives and cyber experts, who dug into his background and accused him of plagiarizing from the Euroboard. As a result, John's carefully constructed persona was shattered, and he quickly became a pariah within the community. The once admired figure fell from grace, his reputation dismantled by the very people who had once revered him. Rather than fight the allegations, John posted a short but infamous reply that would become legendary within the Viva Apocalypse community. In true degenerate Discord user fashion, he simply replied with, "Your mom." And that's how the tragic end of the famous John Nennan came about. Now we're back in the present, where our guy is still staring at his Christmas tree. All the accusations against John Ninan have mostly faded since the nukes dropped, but he's still curious why John is trying to connect with him. He wonders if there might be an imposter, but there's still a chance it could be the real John Nennan. To figure out what's going on, he reaches out to one of the former game developers who turned hacker, asking if he could shed some light on the person who left the message on his tree. After asking his question, he waits for a while for a response. When the reply finally comes, Fox Games asks if he recognizes the name 180C Multiverse. But our guy has never heard of this name before, and he certainly does not want to meet someone unexpected. A bit later, a broadcast comes on, telling everyone it's a message from the National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis. They're saying that even in a world that's pretty much toast, having a nation still counts for something. Countless lives have been lost and many cities reduced to rubble, but the committee has managed to re-establish the National Emergency Management Agency before the upcoming election. Director Sang-hoon Lee, who's in charge of disaster rescue, is reportedly still alive and committed to rebuilding Korea. Even so, Parky knows this doesn't mean there's a ton of hope left. It's only a matter of time before things might go completely sideways. Still, he packs up 3 days worth of rations and water and decides to head out. He wants to make the most of the state's resources while he can. After all, setting up near a city was part of the plan from the start. With that, he's all ready to head out and visit the city of Seoul. After a year and a half since the apocalypse began, seeing his beloved city in ruins hits him hard. He's feeling a mix of nostalgia and melancholy, seeing everything torn apart. There's also a bit of relief in seeing that some people are still hanging on. As he walks through the city, he sees rescue soldiers burning piles of bodies, turning them to ashes. He makes his way to the building where the National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis is based. Once inside, he faces the receptionist and straight up tells her he's there to see Director Sang-hoon Lee. To make things smoother, he flashes his hunter license and lets her know he's Gyu Park from his military academy days. With a smile, he wraps it up, hoping she'll get the message to the director. Here's the lowdown of this organization. The National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis, or NCOC for short, is all about managing and restoring the country. It's made up of Korea's military, administration folks, and former graduates from the Hunter Military Academy. The one running the show is Sang-hoon Lee, a former hunter and the current disaster rescue director. When our guy arrives, the receptionist tells him to hang tight while she contacts the director. But he figures the director probably won't meet him anyway, so he decides to sneak in while she's distracted. Just as he's about to make his move, an officer approaches him. The officer reminds our hero of the current frontline situation, with battles heating up and every able-bodied person needed to defend the country. Park just sighs and flatly refuses, reminding the man that he's already retired. You see, Park has a pretty good grasp of the situation on the front line. Given the nature of this war, quality is way more important than quantity. Instead of just picking anyone like they used to, the military now wants healthier individuals for recruitment. But to him, it's all moot, since in the end, it feels like they're just sending people to their deaths, and he's got no intention of marching toward his own demise. The officer quickly reminds our guy that he's a former hunter, so how come he is turning the offer down? Hearing this, Park facepalms in frustration and asks if the director sent him, but the officer says no. It turns out it was committee member Dharam Kim who made the request. This name takes him by surprise, and he never imagined Dharam Kim would be part of the committee. We flash back to the past, where we see Dharam Kim and our guy together. Our boy is comforting her, urging her to keep pushing and reminding her that as long as they produce results, she'll be forgiven. Back in the present, our guy finally meets the lady from the committee. She greets him, but he shows no emotion. So, she cuts straight to the chase and tells him she needs him to take part in a monster hunt. Parky sticks to his guns, but the lady asks if he's really in a position to refuse given the current state of the world. He reminds her that they had previously agreed never to serve again. She then drops the bomb that this request also comes from director Sang-hoon Lee. Parky's interest is piqued, and he asks why. The lady explains that Sang-hoon holds no grudge against him and is too busy dealing with other things to worry about staff shortage. She's sure our boy is well aware of the front line's daily struggles. Parky, of course, knows exactly what's going on out there, maybe even more than he'd like, and this just makes him sad. The lady apologizes for bringing up such harsh memories, and then asks if Parky has heard of the Tempest Group. She explains that Chairman Poncho J has mobilized his employees and created Tempest Group to tackle the monster problem. But unfortunately, they still don't have enough manpower. They've requested her help, but she's already stretched too thin and doesn't have anyone else to spare. She tells him straight up to just go there and put on an act. If he does that, she promises she'll make sure he doesn't get sent to the front lines as long as she's around. Parky quickly agrees, and as he looks deep into her eyes, he notices that while everyone else seems to have changed, she somehow remains the same as ever. He tells her he'll be in touch again. Meanwhile, there's a buzz in the community about what will happen to the chaebols if the world collapses. A chaebol is a large, family-controlled industrial conglomerate in South Korea. It's a topic any Korean would be curious about what they are going to do with their wealth in this messed-up world. Well, everyone's curious questions has been answered when the hideout of Seokju Group chairman Park Cheol-ju has been found, and it turns out they built an entire ecosystem within the walls. Their choice was clear: to live a peaceful life. Parky finds it fascinating that with assets in the trillions, you can definitely pull off something like this. Abandoning the group and status built over a lifetime to protect one's life and loved ones is a rational choice in a collapsed world. Most conglomerates did the same, but as always, some people chose a different path. And Chairman Poncho J is one of those rich people who does not want to abandon their employees and his factory, which is why he established this group known as Tempest Group. Our boy's job with the Tempest Group is set for a month after his meeting with Dharam Kim. The Tempest headquarters, designed and built by world-class British architects, was unfortunately halted by nuclear explosions and power cuts. Because of this, he has to take a cramped elevator to the 55th floor, and the crisp, cold air is killing him. When Parky arrives outside the executive boardroom, he reflects on how, back in the day, this was a place only the elite were allowed to enter. As he steps into the room, he notices everyone seated as usual, and Chairman Poncho J doesn't even bother to turn around. A guy in glasses approaches Parky and reveals that he knows Parky used to be a hunter. Our boy greets him promptly, and the man cuts straight to the chase, asking about Parky's rank. Our clueless guy is a bit taken aback to see how this man did not even bother with the formalities. Nonetheless, Park claims he was a D-rank hunter. The man in glasses then probes into Parky's past experiences, and Parky just told everything from his imagination, because most of his records were destroyed anyway, so no one can tell if he is lying. After the man finishes profiling Parky, he tells him to wait outside. And for now, all he has to do is play along and blend in, just as Dharam told him to do so. Just then, a woman approaches Parky and says she's heard he's a hunter. She asks if that's true. When Parky confirms, she explains that a group of zombies has appeared near a factory run by the Tempest Group. They gathered some people to respond, but there's only so much non-professionals can handle. So, they requested military support from the committee. Unfortunately, most of the people protecting the factory died. She finds it ironic that, even in such a dire situation, people are sacrificed for the company's sake. She wonders what kind of glory they think they'll gain from company loyalty in a ruined world. To her, it seems like they've lost their minds. She grabs his hands and reveals that her father, Chang Soo-ji, is still at the factory and begs him to save him. She promises to repay him in any way she can, just as long as he brings her father back. Just then, the man in glasses calls Parky over and tells him to follow. When Parky asks where they're going, the man simply says he'll find out soon enough. Before he follows, Parky agrees to help her and tells her he'll do his best, though he cautions her not to expect miracles since hunters aren't gods. Man, it was all good until our boy was alone in the bunker surviving. I don't really like this political stuff. Let me know what you think so far. Also, there are shit-ton time jumps which also might be confusing. Parky reflects on how heavily Korea's economy relies on its sea routes. Some companies have managed to hang on, but their downfall seems inevitable due to the monsters, and the Tempest Group is no exception. He's impressed by their armory, which includes 3.5th generation tanks. It's clear that when the ultra-wealthy decide to build a personal army, they don't hold back. As Parky takes in the impressive setup, a guy approaches and salutes his seniors. This newcomer introduces himself as Sang-min Park, a former hunter and a member of Congress who will oversee the operation. Parky finds it intriguing that he's in Congress and not even over 40. It makes sense though, being a hunter is a hot resume item these days, which is why Sang-min probably got elected as a member of Congress. Once everyone gathers around, Sang-min Park proposes deploying all their troops right from the start. But then someone points out that there are thousands of zombies at the factory and mentions that Sang-min was the one who had pushed back this operation by a month. Sang-min explains that the delay was strategic. According to their research, zombies have a limited lifespan. They keep using up nutrients while they're active and can only last about a month. So, the zombies at the factory should be starving or close to it. The necromancer-type monsters won't be much of a threat without their zombie minions, and they should be able to handle it with their tanks. Everyone is impressed by this insight into zombie lifespans. They then turn to Poncho J, the Tempest Group chairman, and ask for his take. Poncho J thinks for a moment and says that as long as they deal with it quickly, he doesn't mind at all. Well, Sang-min Park comes across as a really convincing guy, and even Parky finds it impressive how easily he's won over all these salarymen. Then Sang-min turns to Parky and asks for his thoughts on the plan. Parky takes a moment, then bluntly says he thinks they're off the mark. This clearly irritates Sang-min, but Parky continues, explaining that when zombies are about to starve, they enter a state of hibernation to lower their metabolism. While it's true zombies will die without nutrients, the factory has been receiving a steady supply of fresh human flesh. Therefore, Parky believes they need to come up with a different plan. You see, Parky doesn't care if the current plan fails and everyone ends up in trouble. He'd rather not be blamed for it later. He's determined to draw the line now to maintain his tranquil, zero-responsibility, reclusive life. He also disagrees with deploying tanks because zombies are sensitive to sound and smell. Using tanks would basically ring the dinner bell for them. Plus, sending in all the troops doesn't seem like a smart move either. All these truth bombs from Parky are clearly getting under the Sang-min's skin. He is feeling agitated and smugly reminds Parky that no one needs his information from some online encyclopedia. But before he can finish his rant, Parky cuts him off coolly, saying that 90% of a battle is in the planning. And if they're going with a trash plan like this, there's no hope for anyone. Sang-min is finally pushed to his limit and asks Parky if he's looking down on a member of Congress, cursing him out for his trash talk. Parky stays as calm as ever, not giving a damn about someone who's all talk. He's already managed to convince Chang Soo-ji, and that's what really matters. The woman from earlier was his daughter, and Parky's priority is saving her father. He puts a hand on Sang-min's shoulder and tells him he's received a request from his daughter. When Parky gives the signal, Sang-min should make a quick exit. Because, well, he knows that the mission is going to be flopped, and he should not lose his life needlessly. The day finally arrives when stubborn Sang-min executes his flawed plan, and it turns into a complete mess. Zombies swarm everywhere, tanks get overrun, and machine guns can't keep up. Sang-min is about to crap his pants, yelling at his soldiers, but it's clear they're screwed. The monsters coming out of the portals are just too huge for the tanks to handle. As soon as a deity-like monster shows up, Parky tells Chang Soo-ji this is the signal, and he should make his quick exit, since humans aren't cut out to deal with these beasts yet. After the mission, Parky checks back in with Darum Kim. She gives him props for playing the part, and is pretty sure this will knock some sense into the chairman for going with flawed plans. She then mentions that the chairman wanted to meet with Parky, and wonders if he has any idea why. Parky isn't quite sure either, but he's pretty certain that chairman wants a replacement for Sang-min Park, who came up with such a dangerous plan. When Parky finally meets the chairman, he greets him promptly. The chairman reveals that he's looked into Parky's career and is very impressed. There are even rumors that the prestigious Sang-hoon Lee couldn't hold a candle to Parky, especially considering Parky had the legendary saviors Hanmin Kaf and Hae-in Na on his squad. The chairman then asks Parky if he's interested in joining him. Parky already knew much of this, so he quickly puts his cutlery aside and stands up to leave. However, the chairman continues, explaining that he's determined to reclaim the factory. Despite being born out of wedlock and having little chance of inheriting the company, he managed to do so. Even though everyone keeps telling him that the world is in ruins and that it's all pointless, he feels it's time to take up the challenge again for the future of his hundreds of employees and their families. That's why he can't give up and is desperate to find any method to defeat these monsters. Parky can see where the chairman's strong spirit comes from and how he's been able to lead his people despite the odds. Even someone as emotionally detached as Parky can feel the impact of such determination. So, despite knowing that things might not end well, Parky agrees to help. In the end, the Tempest Group's factory mission fails, but Parky is relieved to see that Chang Soo-ji, the father he promised to save, is not among the casualties. This confirms that the daughter's plea was not in vain. Although the Tempest group as a whole was not entirely a failure in their mission, the chairman, Poncho J, managed to reunite with his employees after becoming a zombie. In a time when many wealthy individuals have abandoned their responsibilities and retreated behind fortified walls, Poncho J's efforts stand out. He has led those who still believe in him and continues to guide them, even in the midst of a world where he and his employees have turned into zombies. Well, that was kinda ironic. In the next scene, we see a lady feeding some cute kittens breadcrumbs. Parky spots this and quickly tells her to stop, saying it could be dangerous. The lady doesn't say anything, just gets up and starts walking away. Parky explains to us that a lot of accidents come from preventable mistakes. He calls it the cat mom incident, which is a bit of a warning sign for him. He goes on to say that it might sound crazy now, but back when the Chinese government was still in existence, South Korea had to send out a hunter unit to deal with monsters coming from China. The monsters were linked to these gates. When the gates first showed up in India, it was a disaster, and soon, other countries in Southeast Asia and China were hit hard too. Korea was next on the list. While he was in China, Parky caught an overgrown sewer rat, which led to discovering weird mutations in creatures near the gates. And this was called the mutation phenomenon. That's why he's concerned that feeding these overgrown kittens could lead to trouble. The lady just shrugs it off, saying there's nothing to worry about, even though Parky had warned her every time he saw her while scavenging. Since she wasn't listening, he decided to let it go, hoping she'd learn the hard way. But he still hoped nothing bad would happen. Just as he's thinking about this, he gets a transmission from Kim Daram. Parky's face twists with annoyance because he really doesn't want to take on another government job. He grabs his head and asks why she's calling. She explains she has one more favor to ask, but Parky reminds her that she promised never to ask him to work again. The lady apologizes and says this situation is urgent. She promises it'll be the last time and assures him he won't be doing a third-party job like he did with the Tempest group. She tells him there's been a mutation outbreak near the Air Force Base where he's stationed. As soon as Parky hears this, he knows his hunch about not feeding those cats was spot on. The lady reports that several mutated stray cats from the gate have attacked residents in nearby apartments. Although casualties haven't been confirmed, the survivors are too scared to come out. Parky bluntly refuses, saying he can't hunt mutants anymore because he lacks the skills, desire, and equipment. The lady tells him he'll be teamed up with an expert, and when Parky asks who, she reveals it's a hunter who now works as a freelancer. The next day, Parky meets the freelancer, Baek Sung-hyun. Parky introduces himself as a former hunter sent by the council for support. Sung-hyun quickly realizes Parky must be Park Yu from the legendary 13th class, and mentions he's also a graduate from the same school. He's surprised to see Parky here for this kind of job, but Parky prefers to avoid discussing that part of his past. They head over to the scene, which is all smeared with blood but oddly devoid of bodies. Sung-hyun explains that he scouted the area and was attacked out of nowhere. The mutants fled after taking a few hits, as they're still essentially just cats at heart. In Parky's mind, he's pretty impressed with Sung-hyun. Hunting mutants solo is no small feat, because only someone with serious skills and guts can pull it off. Parky figures Sung-hyun must be at least an A-rank hunter, or at least that's how he'd rate him based on his skills. Sung-hyun then mentions he had those mutants on the ropes. He was about to finish them off with a final C4 when someone stopped him. Thanks to that intervention, all those cats bolted, and now finding them again is going to be a pain. Parky has a pretty good guess about who that person might be, and sure enough, we see the same woman calling out for her kittens. Parky watches from the sidelines, certain that if she's calling them, those cats will come running. And just as he imagined, the cats appear at her call. The soldiers exchange looks, load their guns, and prepare to surround both the cats and the woman. Parky doesn't waste a second. He starts laying into the cats with a hail of bullets, and the poor woman screams and cries as her beloved kittens are torn apart. Despite her desperate pleas, Parky keeps up the relentless assault, the mutated creatures dropping left and right. At this point, the woman's grief turns into anger. She rushes in front of the cats, trying to protect them. Just as our guy stops shooting upon seeing the woman standing before him, the freelancer throws his C4. Right before it explodes in her face, the scene transitions into her past. She was once alone and lost, but those same cats found her and led her to safety in a rundown place. She lived with them, finding solace and shelter in their company. Those happy memories contrast starkly with the present chaos as the C4 detonates, obliterating everything in a massive explosion. Parky gives Sung-hyun an annoyed look, clearly disturbed by his cold, detached approach. Sung-hyun just offers a faint smile and shrugs. In this world, he says, we can't afford to indulge in unnecessary emotions. As the arc wraps up, the scene shifts to a plane gliding through the sky. Parky, watching it from his bunker, reflects on how he's been seeing these planes more often lately. Inside his bunker, he's whipping up a batch of delicious noodles. He muses about how people need entertainment, and it's not just a luxury but often becomes a tonic for weary souls. For him, that entertainment comes from Viva Apocalypse. While the forum's initial purpose as an information hub has faded, it has evolved into a sanctuary for true doomsday enthusiasts who survived the apocalypse. Isolated from the outside world, it's become a high-quality community where people share their daily lives and find comfort. It functions much like old-school online communities, where you can post, comment, and like things. Posts that get a lot of likes are featured in the best bulletin board section. And not to brag, but Parky, who under his skeleton persona has made it to the best bulletin board. Parky's rise to fame on Viva Apocalypse came from his clever and restrained write-up about his encounter with Chairman Peng Ho-jae. His knack for intriguing storytelling and the sheer novelty of meeting a Chaebol chairman helped him gain a bit of recognition. Around this time, a new post sent the community into an uproar: the announcement of the 7th Hope Lottery. This lottery was organized by the National Committee and was given alongside wages to workers. The drawing was held every 3 days at designated locations. Instead of just hard labor, the lottery added some fun, making it increasingly popular among public workers. The prizes ranged from basic ration items and slightly rare daily necessities for 2nd to 5th place. But the first prize was the real game changer, which was an apartment allocation voucher. These apartments were not just any living spaces. They had self-sufficient systems for electricity and food, and top-notch defense facilities. Their luxurious specs were reminiscent of the hideouts of the ultra-wealthy, stirring immense excitement among the community. People were drawn to the idea of escaping their cramped, unpleasant bunkers, even if only for a few days. The lottery quickly became a hot topic, as everyone dreamed of the chance to live in one of these coveted apartments. And finally, the real winner showed up on the forum, someone with a nickname that had 9 M's, so people just called him M9. Parky remembered seeing this guy at past offline gatherings of the John Neenan community. Back then, M9 was just quietly grilling meat, not making much of a splash. But after winning the lottery, his post blew up with both admiration and jealousy. It was like the reward got to his head, and he started acting all high and mighty, looking down on everyone like they were ants. His new attitude turned the community against him, and people were furious. Parky is skeptical, though. He couldn't understand why, in a time when even simple repairs depend on public labor, the National Emergency Committee would build such fancy apartments just for a lottery winner. He is pretty sure Korea does not have the resources to just hand out something so extravagant to pacify the public. So Parky decides to reach out to Kim Daram after a long while. When Parky calls Kim Daram, he says he has a question about the hope, and asks if the government is really building apartments to give out to the public. Kim Daram explains that the hope is basically a mirage. She tells him they're moving to Jeju soon, and will all be there by next spring at the latest, because there's no more hope for Seoul. That's why Parky has been seeing so many airplanes lately. She warns him not to discuss this with anyone else, as it's supposed to be highly confidential. Parky realizes the reality is even harsher than he imagined. It seems the capital city is being abandoned. Even though he's not in Seoul, living in the bunker feels odd. There's no real distinction between day and night, and the same monotonous meals and worries just keep piling up. Still, he feels a bit relieved that he's not in Seoul and won't be left to die alone. Parky looks again at the post from the lottery winner and wonders if he should share what he knows, even though Daram specifically told him not to reveal anything. He figures that if he exposes the truth about the hope and the national reconstruction being just a bunch of hot air, his post would trend instantly. In the end, he decides to keep quiet, letting the abandonment of Seoul continue. Instead, he focuses on some organic farming and purchases an indoor cultivation kit. After buying it, he throws a bag full of goods at the seller, asking if this will cover the payment. He's trying to trade cigarettes, and the seller quickly agrees. Well, in this post-apocalyptic world, cigarettes are more valuable than gold to smokers. While the workers are lined up for their daily rations and rewards, a commotion breaks out nearby. A few people are looking down on those waiting in line, clearly feeling superior. One woman points out to the rowdy bunch that she doesn't get why they're acting so high and mighty since they're living off the same rations as everyone else. As the troublemakers walk away, a guy fills Parky in on what's going on. He explains that these people are Hope's prospective residents, and they've been causing a stir lately. They started forming their own groups and now act like they're part of some privileged class. Suddenly, a woman announces that today's ration distribution is over. The people in line complain, saying they still haven't gotten their share. The lady sternly tells them to leave because the allocated distribution for each region has been cut. The crowd isn't having it and protests, saying they'll end up dead without rations. Meanwhile, the truck holding the rations speeds off, leaving the angry mob trailing behind. Seeing the distress and chaos, Parky realizes how people are being toyed with in the name of hope. Without hope, their lives feel meaningless, so the government gives them fake hope just to keep them hanging on a bit longer. Eventually, Parky drops the final bomb on the community, revealing that the hope is just a bunch of bull and will never be built. It's all just a mirage. As soon as people hear this, they become sad and even more distressed. Man, this series is wild. It's like a collection of random life snippets from our boy's experiences, with no real continuity. The next scene jumps back to the past, where our boy finally resigns from being a hunter. One of his friends yells at him, asking why he's leaving and reminding him that it's going to be really tough without him. He begs him to come back, promising to talk to the authorities and get him a break. He just needs to endure this one time, and things will surely get easier. But our guy lashes out, asking how his friend can be so sure the situation will change. He points out that by holding on and staying, he's trapping his subordinates in this living hell, making it impossible for them to escape. Ever since that day, anyone who's been to the battlefield knows everything is basically over. So, he tells his friend not to stop him from quitting. Finally, Kyungmin decides to stop pestering him and just says it's raining heavily outside, so he should grab an umbrella. Kyungmin's frustration is obvious, and Parky can hear the edge in his voice. As Parky heads out, he tells his friend to make sure to survive in this hellhole as well. Since he left his comrades behind, Parky has been living solo, surviving in his bunker. Even though he's made it this far, his thoughts haven't changed. He's convinced that human extinction can't be stopped. The overwhelming despair, the shivers, and that feeling of absolute hopelessness haven't faded. All his efforts now are just desperate tries to hang on a little longer. As he's browsing the community, a guy named Keystone mentions there are earthquakes in the southern part of Paju. This brings back memories for our boy, because Paju was the first area in the country where a gate appeared. If you feel localized earthquakes near a gate, it usually indicates the emergence of a giant species. While grabbing his bicycle, he thinks about how the National Defense Committee must be in shambles right now. The destructive power of a giant species is like a natural disaster to humans. It can't be physically stopped. Fortunately, they're vulnerable to Earth's environment, so they start to decay as soon as they emerge from the gates. The bigger they are, the faster they collapse. So it's best to anticipate their path and avoid them, like dodging a typhoon. Just as he steps out of his bunker, a bright, blinding light catches him off guard for a moment. He's sure he needs a forecast to avoid danger in advance. Inside the headquarters of the National Defense Committee, chaos reigns. Employees are frantically rushing around as if a disaster is about to hit. Among the frenzy, our hero Parky is struck by how much more chaotic the place is than he expected. A guy bumps into Parky, spilling papers everywhere. Parky quickly helps him gather the paperwork, and the employee, grateful but in a hurry, rushes back to his duties with the papers in hand. While Parky was picking up the papers, he had noticed that a kraken-type monster is expected. It's one of the more common giant species, usually taking the form of an octopus. But when it feels threatened, it transforms into an armored form. The dangerous part is its death ray, which can penetrate everything in its path and disintegrate any living organisms into nothingness. When the kraken-type monster popped up near Tokyo recently, it wiped out over 50,000 people before it decayed onto Nagano Prefecture. Now it's heading right through Parky's area. If he hadn't spotted it, he's pretty sure he'd be toast. He sees a lady up above who tells him to evacuate because the kraken's path is close to his bunker. Well, Parky doesn't need any extra nudges. He's already aware of the danger. He rushes back to his bunker and grabs his supplies to evacuate. He then remembers the lady's warning and decides it's crucial to alert the community as well. So he posts a detailed warning about the kraken-type monster and the need to evacuate. But his post barely gets any attention, leaving Parky to wonder if his warning isn't enough to make people sit up and take notice. He stretches his arms and decides it's time to evacuate, because he's already done all he can. Before heading out, he catches a transmission from Sue, who tries to catch up with our boy. But he drops the usual chit-chat and tells her to grab their Jeep truck, get her mother in it, and evacuate as soon as possible. Unfortunately, she breaks the news that their car broke down and the engine's not working, and they're stuck. This raises serious concerns because the building where Sue and her mother are is north, right in the path of the kraken-type monster. There's no time for a rescue, and with the monster heading that way, there's nothing Parky can do to help, and doesn't want to risk his own life either. He advises them to head as far south as they can. Sue agrees, and before the transmission ends, she warns him that heavy rain is expected tomorrow and wishes him good luck. It breaks our hero's heart that in this apocalyptic world, letting emotions sway him is a luxury he can't afford. He remembers a time when his friend advised him to take an umbrella because it was going to rain. That was when he resigned from being a hunter, and his friend probably died while fighting. With that memory in mind, Parky makes a snap decision. He tells Sue to hold on and not to cut the transmission. He promises her he'll be there in 30 minutes or less, and instructs her to get ready with her mom and wait for him. He quickly opens up the inventory where weapons and other supplies are stashed. He needs weapons because a pack of mutant wild dogs lives between his place and the building where that mother and daughter are living. If he wants to get to them fast, he's got to go through these mutts. No room for detours. So he grabs his gun and gets ready to plow right through. He hops on his ATV and charges straight into the pack of mutant dogs. With one hand on the wheel and the other aiming his gun, he starts taking them down like they're just watermelons at a carnival shooting game. He's hitting with such precision that these monsters are losing their heads like they're water balloons. It's a bit of a juggling act, though. Trying to keep an eye on the road while aiming is like multitasking in a circus. He then reflects back on his days as a hunter. He used to be part of a team where roles are usually split into three. The support guy who fries enemies from the rear with heavy weapons, the spotter who coordinates from mid-range with tactical assistance and covering fire, and the assault who tackles monsters head-on at the front line. Our boy has always been the assault, ripping through monsters with the help of his teammates. But right now, he's flying solo and has to juggle both fending off mutant wild dogs and maintaining speed. Just as he's about to reach the target building, he spots a creature perched above. Taking a closer look, he realizes it's the leader of the wild pack. With a howl, the leader summons a whole horde of monsters that quickly surround his ATV. Despite this, he keeps shooting left and right, trying to fend off the monsters. But the leader and its minions are relentless, and he can't take down the leader from this distance with just his pistol. Then, a wild dog slams into his ATV, nearly throwing him off balance. As he regains control, he looks back and realizes the mutant leader is using its minions to toy with him, making him the prey in a twisted hunt, kind of like how humans hunt animals. The leader communicates with its pack in a guttural foreign language, and our guy is taken aback by how this beast is directing its underlings with howls. But as soon as the beast charges, he opens fire, putting holes in the monster while keeping his speed up. He switches to his other gun, starts shooting again, and after a few sharp turns, he manages to shake off a few of the dogs. But the leader beast is still hot on his tail, and he's running low on ammo. Just as another wild dog leaps at him, a devastating shot rings out from nowhere, blowing the beast's head apart and sending it crashing to the ground. Well, it's Rebecca, with her godly sniping skills, saving the day once again. Looks like our guy was worrying for nothing since this is Rebecca's sniper territory after all. Anyway, as more wild mutant dogs show up, he asks Rebecca for a hand, promising they'll be done in 3 minutes. He starts swinging his axe, slicing through the monsters like they're cucumbers. Rebecca takes aim and starts obliterating the monsters in her sights. Meanwhile, the leader beast just stands above, watching its minions fall like bugs. It's clearly pissed, but when our guy glares at it, the beast quickly leaps away and vanishes. The mother and daughter arrive just in time, and the girl gives our guy a heartfelt hug. He tells them they need to get out of there fast. They hop onto the ATV and zoom away, with the sun beginning to rise. The little girl, captivated by the beautiful sunrise, stands up and points at the horizon. But it turns out that dazzling light isn't from the sun. It's actually the dying remnants of a kraken-type monster shimmering brightly even from this distance. It looks like the monster's finally done for. To celebrate, our guy tells the mother and daughter to pose for a photo, and he snaps a great selfie with the monster dying in the background. While our boy is busy clicking photos, someone else is also taking pictures of him. And there is also a woman along with this man. But before we can figure out who this mysterious person is, the scene switches back into Parky's bunker, where we see our boy has posted that photo of mother and daughter into the community feed, and he starts getting a ton of likes and some pretty nice comments. Then, he notices a notification from this serial killer defender, who apparently has made another post of his victim he has killed. Parky curiously clicks on the post to see who the defender's taken down this time. Turns out it's a kraken dying, and one hand in the photo looks oddly familiar. Well, it finally clicks in our boy's mind that this is the same spot where he took that cute photo of the mother and daughter, and the hand in the kraken's picture belongs to the little girl, Sue. Right then, he gets a message from the defender. When he opens it, he sees a photo of himself, which was taken without him noticing. The defender asks if that's actually Parky in the photo. Parky quickly pieces things together. Given the defender's old posts, he probably lives near Gwangyo, so it's likely just a coincidence they crossed paths. After thinking it over, Parky decides to deny it and tells the defender that the person in the photo isn't him. The defender tells Parky to stop lying and claims they've seen everything already. They thank him for the kraken warning, which helped them survive, and then they ask if Parky wants to be friends. We don't know yet if the defender is a guy or a girl, but we'll just assume it's a dude for now, until we get the scoop. Parky figures the defender must have caught his kraken post, even though it barely had any views. Looks like one of those views was from the defender. Parky then hears a transmission from Rebecca and asks what's up. She reveals that a lot of people are entering into their territory. Hearing this, Parky tells her to be careful and cuts the transmission. Well, it's no surprise to him that unwanted guests have started to enter their territory. You see, after a tough battle with the mutant dog leader last time, the dog pack is significantly weakened and can't effectively block the refugees from reaching Parky's hideout. But that's not even the main problem right now. The real issue is that these folks are camping right next to the generator's exhaust vent, which is the last place Parky wants them to be. The heart of Parky's bunker is the diesel generator, known as the skeleton heart. It's a massive piece of machinery that takes up an entire underground floor and has an enormous power output, but it also pumps out a lot of exhaust. A house with smoke rising from its chimney suggests someone's cooking inside. If Parky runs the generator and the exhaust starts billowing out, the refugees will discover the location of his bunker. But if he turns off the skeleton heart, the bunker's power and the home-like comfort it provides will vanish. In the sweltering pre-summer heat, if the food in the freezer thaws and spoils, it'll wreck his carefully laid survival plans. Given that the refugees don't seem like a group of raiders, Parky decides to try solving this through dialogue. As an old man with white hair is telling everyone to set up their base, Parky shows up with his gun and tells him this is private property. He suggests it might be best if everyone just left. The old man's eyes lock onto Parky's big rifle. A woman behind him pipes up, saying that in a crisis, it shouldn't matter whose land it is. But the old man shuts her down and tells Parky not to worry. He says they're from the pioneering team and even flashes a pioneering permit. Parky thinks this pioneering corps sounds familiar. He remembers an article he saw in the community. The government had moved a bunch of people to major cities for urban reconstruction. When that didn't pan out, the so-called unnecessary people were dumped on the outskirts under the name of the pioneering corps, mostly older folks. In short, as the capacity to accommodate people in the destroyed cities dwindled, those left behind were dumped on the outskirts under the guise of being pioneers. Even though they're not raiders yet, Parky still tells them they've got 3 days to clean up and move out. The old man gets fired up and insists they're state-sanctioned people. Parky reminds him that the state they're talking about doesn't exist anymore, so there is no need for them to stick to the law and stay here. But 3 days pass, and as the next day dawns, there's no sign of them leaving. The old man makes it clear that he won't leave without orders from headquarters. He further explains that if they move out of their designated pioneering area, their rations for their families still in the city will be cut off. They just want to stay for a few weeks. Then an older woman steps in and starts begging. She pleads that everyone here is an unfortunate soul abandoned by their families due to their age and expelled by the country. She insists they mean no harm, and even puts something in Parky's hand as a gesture of goodwill. Eventually, Parky gives in to their demands. His bunker is now dark, hot, and humid, and he's at a loss for what to do. He even considers killing them all, but he doesn't want to harm innocent people without a reason. So, he turns to his laptop, hoping to figure something out. He posts on the Viva Apocalypse community, explaining his predicament, how he can't use the generator because of the refugees outside. At first, the responses are pretty lackluster. But then, Defender sends a message, reminding Parky that these people are potential looters. If their supplies get cut off, they'll likely come after him first and won't hesitate to kill him. Defender advises Parky to strike first to ensure his survival. Parky isn't too surprised by this response, because it's pretty typical from someone like Defender. But as much as he hates to admit it, he somewhat agrees with Defender. Still, he'll have to keep an eye on them a bit longer before taking any action. A few days later, Parky meets up with a guy from the forum. While they're chatting, Parky explains that this guy is Kyle Dose, one of the rare normal users of Vivia Apocalypse. Kyle mentions he found something interesting in a nearby mountain, so Parky decides to check it out. When they finally reach the spot, Kyle points to a tank-like thing. It doesn't take Parky long to recognize it as a capsule, or as he puts it, this thing is their egg. We are still in the dark about who this egg actually belongs to. A few days ago, he happened upon Kyle Doss's viral post with the photo of the egg, and most of the commenters naturally did not know what to make of it. Gyu knew it was not a marshmallow or anything like that. It was a monster's egg. Seeing that post, an idea to remedy his current pioneer problem struck him. If the pioneers couldn't leave without orders from the higher-ups, then giving them a reason to leave should be enough. So, Skelton started some correspondence with Kyle, warning his fellow forum regular about the object's danger. Then he offered to get rid of it for free. This was an object more valuable than gold. Thanks to him being so active in the community, Kyle Dose was not too suspicious of Gyu, and they eventually agreed to meet in person. Using his car for a bit of long-distance travel, the GPS seemed to be working with outdated information since the city's terrain had altered. To pass through the metropolitan area faster, he decided to contact the Road Control HQ of the National Committee. They confirmed his identity and his connection with Commissioner Kim Darum. The radio personnel immediately gave him the updated route to follow to navigate the area without problems. This was one of the perks of having connections with the National Committee. You get to access safe roads controlled by the government. Gyu's destination was none other than the infamous Paju, where the first rift in South Korea appeared. The capsule that Kyle Doss found should be in a remote mountain right outside the city. The area near the rift was heavily guarded by elite hunters and the military, but they would not have expected an egg to appear on the mountainside. Upon arriving, Gyu introduced himself to Kyle Doss as Skelton. Both of them were armed with quite a bit of firepower, not one for dilly-dallying. He asked to see where the strange object was immediately. When a capsule appears, it's an indication that the surrounding environment is being eroded by the rift. It's a sign that the land surrounding Paju is about to become uninhabitable. On the way to the strange object, he confessed to Kyle that what he found was a monster egg, freaking out the prepper. Upon arriving, Gyu took out his axe and politely asked Kyle to step back for a moment as he walked fearlessly. He also told Kyle to just take his truck and run away if he died. His nonchalance just creeped Kyle out even more. Shifting his focus to the capsule, Gyu hoped that this little idea of his wouldn't lead to his death. He burst forward at terrifying speeds while brandishing his axe with focus and precision. With enough force to split the surface, he swung his axe full of killing intent. But at the last second, just a hair's breadth away from touching the surface, he used his outstanding muscle control to stop with all his strength. Afterward, an avatar that resembled his arm emerged from the capsule, mimicking the same attack he used. But just like what he did, the avatar also held back at the very last second before opening his throat right up. Kyle watched from the sidelines, his gun drawn and aimed at the fading avatar. As Gyu explained that the capsule was coated with a reflective barrier, it had the ability to distort and twist dimensions, sending a hostile attack back to the attacker with equal intensity. That's one of the many reasons why humans can't defeat monsters. So, as long as the egg does not feel threatened, there should be nothing to worry about. Still, Kyle was fearful of the possibility of something uncontrollable bursting out of the bizarre object. If that was the case, then Gyu would undoubtedly die, making him sound even more unhinged. After carefully lifting the egg capsule, they managed to secure the odd thing at the back of Gyu's truck. Kyle still couldn't believe that the skeleton from the forums was this fearless dude. He was drastically different from his online persona. Almost everyone in the community saw Skelton as some weird old guy who used strange tags, engaged in low-level trolling, and really normie stuff. Embarrassed, Gyu just wanted to get on his way. Before he left, Kyle extended his gratitude for getting rid of such a dangerous thing. As payment, Gyu asked him to just like his posts from now on. Kyle smiled and agreed, but it looked fake. Since D-Day, this was Gyu's first time meeting an online buddy in real life. It oddly felt like meeting an old friend or a cousin he was close to as a kid. It was a bizarre feeling nonetheless. Maybe he was feeling a bit more sentimental because of this endless apocalypse. On the way back, he dropped the capsule on a nearby highway, a little farther from the pioneer shelter. Just as planned, the elderly pioneering team eventually happened upon it in one of their runs. They initially thought that it was some object from the rice paddies, but its ethereal glow was telling a different story. So, the pioneering leader radioed the HQ to report the unidentified object on the highway. He was shocked to receive a very urgent order to get the hell out of the area as quickly as possible. The Road Control HQ's drone observation confirmed that the object on the road was a monster spore. Fearing that it might be in an active state, the pioneers were to get out and evacuate immediately. The leader wanted to ask a few more questions, but the urgency in the HQ representative's voice was enough to make them obey without questions. Back in the bunker, Gyu could finally turn his generator back on, thanks to his flawless performance. Thanks to that monster egg, his territory had regained some much-needed peace and quiet. Without the pioneers, he could let the exhaust go and do its thing without worrying about the noise. A month quickly passed by without much fuss. Gyu was chilling like a villain in his cushy bunker, scrolling the forum as one does. The pioneer squad hadn't shown up since that day, and the shelter entrance was sealed off. The pesky National Committee hadn't contacted him as of late, so there wasn't any reason to venture out. Those guys must be busy with their escape to Jeju Island. Gyu had practically achieved the perfect tranquility of mind and body. If days like this continued, he would be thankful for it. The only annoyance he had was the incessant comments Defender made on his posts. On the front page of the forum, he found updates regarding the current civil unrest in Seoul. People had been protesting the National Committee's plan to relocate out of the capital, as they feared being left to fend for themselves. They found the plans of transfer selfish and confusing, demanding an explanation for such a drastic development. The one affected most by these protests was director Lee Sang-hoon. He looked out his office window while the protesters hurled rocks at the building. Out of nowhere, the director asked if that guy was still alive. Of course, he was talking about Park Gyu. The former hunter and current director of NCOC found himself thinking about an old comrade. If Gyu was still alive, the director wanted him contacted and asked how long he planned to keep on hiding like a coward. The legendary hunter, known as Professor, wanted to know. Years ago, when the first rift appeared on the planet, countries all around the globe were alarmed by the supernatural phenomenon. But at the same time, every nation, without exception, showed a wishy-washy, double-sided nature. They all tried to turn this abnormality to their own advantage. Soon after, large-scale explorations were launched to research the true nature of the anomalies. At first, the ones they sent were academic professionals, treating the small rifts as scientific discoveries. Some of the first teams were tasked with documenting the rift's size and outward appearance, recording it solely for academic purposes. That was also when the rifts revealed their true purpose to the world. In one of the bright rifts, the researchers laid eyes upon the first documented case of monsters emerging from the rift. It was a bloodbath, to say the least. The monster that came out of the rift had a form similar to a spider, and its sole purpose was to kill and lay waste to every living being nearby. The launch of research expeditions hastened the eruption of monsters. With humanity caught off guard, enormous casualties followed. Only then did the countries realize the severity of their situation. And so, to fight against the threat of monsters, competent nations began training a new branch of the military, labeling them as hunters. Specialized facilities to cultivate young talents were swiftly established. In South Korea, Park Gyu entered the 13th class of Guard, the prestigious professional hunter training institution of his home country. It was not a rare sight to see his name high up on the leaderboard, followed by Lee Sang-hoon, the current director of the National Commission. For 3 years in a row, he held the #1 position in the entire school. He had become some sort of a legend, with rumors about how he only thought about killing monsters and all he did was train. There were even murmurs about how he did image training, even while he was asleep. Park Gyu was as hardcore as one could be, an absolute freak of nature born to be a hunter. Trailing behind him every step of the way was Lee Sang-hoon, but that was the past. Right now, Park Gyu was just another doomsday prepper stuck inside his bunker, killing time. Suddenly, his satellite radio started ringing with a call from Kim Daram. He picked up, expecting the commission to request his help in suppressing the protests in Seoul. But it was not Kim Daram on the other line. It was a man asking if he was involved with the appearance of the capsule on Road 13. Gyu immediately frowned after hearing that voice. It was the dignified voice of Lee Sang-hoon. He was an old friend, classmate, and comrade in arms. With a sigh and a headache coming his way, Gyu asked how the commission found out. Since a capsule suddenly appeared in an area free from monster erosion, the culprit would probably be someone stationed near the road. The list of suspects capable of such a crafty plan was not long at all. Lee Sang-hoon scolded Gyu for doing something so risky. If a monster had been summoned in the event of the capsule being torn, it would have been mayhem. The use of the word summons to refer to a monster egg might seem odd, but that was because this capsule acts as a temporary portal to wherever the monsters come from. Gyu retired from active duty a long time ago, so his information regarding monsters fell a little behind. But this call wasn't really about the dangers of the capsule, and Lee Sang-hoon wanted to get straight to the point. He wanted to extend an invitation to Park Gyu to join them at Jeju Island. Lee Sang-hoon had prepared an instructional position open for his taking. With a direct recommendation from the director, he should slot in without a problem. Gyu did not even entertain the idea, and outright refused the offer, asserting that he liked his current life. But Lee Sang-hoon did not think there was a future hiding beneath a lifeless bunker. He even brought up the possibility that Gyu was just wallowing in his inferiority complex once again. Back then, there was nothing they could do. Even though they were promising students, they did not have any talent for what came after. Images of humans wielding powers that defied the laws of physics still plagued Gyu's mind. Nevertheless, bringing up unresolved issues of the past was not going to make him change his mind. He did not want the instructor position. Lee Sang-hoon was already half expecting the stubborn refusal of his old friend, same as ever, refusing to listen to reason. But he warned Gyu that the entire metropolitan area might be plunged into danger soon. Before hanging up, he urged Park Gyu to stay alive no matter what. When the radio call ended, Gyu was left with a gnawing feeling of isolation. The very next day, he went out in the sun, sickle in hand, and harvested plenty of grains from his rice paddies. It had been 1 year and 11 months since the war broke out. A few months ago, he scattered some rice seeds in an abandoned paddy field, and it led to a massive harvest today. With a sack full of grain, Gyu happily walked back to his bunker, his gun strapped up front. He recalled hearing Old Man Kim telling him that all he needed was rice seeds and a hoe, and he could have food to eat for a long time. Thanks to that old man's advice, he learned not to underestimate the power of rice grains. He would be feasting on freshly cooked rice for the foreseeable future. Back at his computer, he happened upon a recent rumor circulating in the community about the infamous defender being a woman. One of the glaring pieces of evidence was unearthed by a user who goes by the name Unicorn18. They started drawing everyone's attention to the shadow in one of the murder certification posts uploaded by Defender. Gyu was well aware that using a gun to kill someone could be easy for some, but moving, dressing, and disposing of a dead body was not. As far as everyone was aware, the Defender handled all of that alone. Gyu found it hard to believe with such thin evidence like a shadow in a photo. For some reason, he could not take his mind off Lee Sang-hoon's plea for him to stay alive. He convinced himself that surviving would not be a problem, as he built the safest place in the world from scratch. Still, he could not help but reminisce about the past, his time in the guard. He was reminded of the young man who always sat in the front row and asked endless questions about everything monster-related with clarity and honesty. That guy, Lee Sang-hoon, was the definition of relentless competitiveness. Gyu's reminiscing was interrupted by the beeping noise of his satellite radio. Based on the caller ID, it should be Kim Daram calling to pester him again. He picked up and immediately went on a tirade about rejecting the Jeju Island gig and refused to pick up any new tasks for the National Commission, as he wouldn't be going out for a while. Just as he was about to hang up, Kim Daram dropped the bombshell that was the news of the director's death. Park Gyu's eyes opened in shock. He had just been recalling memories of Lee Sang-hoon, and now he was hearing that the guy was dead. He inquired as to how and why this happened so suddenly. Kim Daram solemnly replied that the director had made an extreme choice by himself. All that guy left was a last will and testament. He must have thought that someone had to take responsibility for the growing civil unrest in the city. There was simply no place left for honest and upright people like Lee Sang-hoon in this ruined world. Kim Daram followed up with the question of whether Park Gyu would come to the funeral or not. They have set up the memorial altar at the military hospital. Given the current situation, the commission barely managed to arrange for it. But to come to Seoul, he would have no other choice but to pass the road on which he dropped a capsule. That in itself should not be a problem. But Kim Daram's tone suggested otherwise. It turned out that yesterday, some security personnel were deployed to guard the area. The National Commission had deployed the awakened ones for this particular operation. Kim Daram wanted to give Gyu the heads up in case it might get awkward if he happened to run into them. He could not believe that the awakened would be deployed near his area of all places. Gyu felt as though Lee Sang-hoon was trying to have a battle of pride with him even in the grave, making his journey to the funeral tougher than necessary. He was practically being forced to take the unpaved road to avoid those awakened. That was exactly the kind of trick the old Lee Sang-hoon would pull. Gyu was so incensed that he forgot that the guy just died, and the image of the old comrade in his mind had gone silent. Walking over to his armory, he picked up 2 tactical axes, one of the few items he brought out of the association after being discharged. On the surface, he would like to believe that taking them does not mean anything, but perhaps he just wanted to visit Lee Sang-hoon as a soldier one last time. And so, he packed those weapons, got on his bicycle, and set off on the path to pay his respects. To avoid the road where the awakened were deployed, he had to take the detour around the nearby unpaved roads, making it a bumpy ride. Even so, he was stopped by some personnel patrolling the vicinity, telling him that passing through was prohibited. As soon as the flashlight lit up both of their faces, the two realized that they had known each other for a mission not too long. The one patrolling the area was none other than Baek Sung-hyun, the freelance hunter who handled miscellaneous tasks for the National Committee, the Kitty Killer. Gyu insisted that he was headed for Seoul, but Baek Sung-hyun must follow protocol and have him step aside for a moment. He would like to let Gyu go to his destination without causing any inconvenience, but that's not really up to him right now. He pointed to a few people lounging around the barricaded highway. They all seemed young and uninterested in the mission at hand. Baek Sung-hyun might have been a formidable hunter in his own right, but he was not the one in charge of this operation. Those guys with bright blue eyes are the ones in control. Park Gyu glared at the youngsters from afar, seeing the embroidered logo on their tracksuits and the acronym of their affiliation, the Roaring Tiger. These days, they were considered to be the real hunters, vastly different from old-timers without the latent talent. As far as Gyu was aware, the new type of hunters appeared around 6 years ago. This phenomenon emerged after about 30% of humanity had been wiped out from all the monster outbreaks occurring left and right. They called it the Awakening. A tiny portion of the population, these new humans, have awakened powers similar to those of the monsters. After extensive research on the phenomenon, experts found a way to artificially induce these powers to a select few. The government actively recruited those with suitable bodies as the new hunters. As a result, the old-school hunters, the old-timers, as they say, were pushed out of the battlefield as the more powerful version of their unit stole the spotlight. One of the blue-eyed awakened raised his head and asked Baek Sung-hyun what the deal was with the trespasser. Baek Sung-hyun grimaced and answered that Gyu was also a former hunter, a powerless old-timer like him. The mischievous awakened trio then started pressing Gyu as to why a former hunter was sneaking around through some shady farmland instead of taking the proper road. When asked if he was a criminal, Gyu returned the question, asking the blue-eyed freak what batch he came from. This sudden question ticked off the trio, their blue eyes snapping onto Gyu. The arrogant awakened slowly made his way to Gyu, nonchalantly inching closer with his hands inside his pockets. Blue Eyes rallied back the question, and Gyu honestly answered that he came from the 13th batch. It had been established that batches before the 18th were old-timers that aren't considered respectable seniors anymore, except for a few people, that is. Blue Eyes wrapped his arm around Gyu's shoulders, lecturing him about the dangers of the capsule and urging Gyu to quietly head back home while they were still just talking. Gyu's fist was practically bursting with veins as he tried his hardest to suppress his anger. But he knew that avoiding conflict would be wise and turning back would be the reasonable thing to do. But he could hear Lee Sang-hoon's voice in his mind, practically demanding for him to come and pay respects one last time. Gyu turned to the road and pointed at the capsule. Equipping one of his axes, he asked the trio if he could pass through in peace if he could just deal with the capsule by himself. The awakened trio found him hilarious and permitted him to give it a shot, thinking that an old-school hunter would not be able to do anything against the anomaly. They even promised that if the old-timer succeeded, one of them would escort him to his destination. Taking this as a show, they jokingly cheered Gyu on. In his mind, he recalled the rules written in the outdated military doctrine. There are not many tactics for engaging monsters alone. Right now, the only applicable method he could use was the simplest of them all. It was the old-school fighting style of close combat at zero distance. Exploding with a quick first step, Gyu brandished his axe against the capsule that he himself transported to the highway. This time, instead of pulling back at the last second, he let the full swing hit the capsule squarely. He did not stop there. He continued raining down attacks from point-blank range, slowly shattering the space around the monster capsule. He was like a madman unleashing a dozen attacks a second. Even the new school hunters watched in horror as they had never seen such intensity in combat before. Baek Sung-hyun might be the only one who knew how legendary Gyu was back in the day, but he was even taken aback. The display of grit he was showing was slowly forcing the capsule to act under the threat of being hacked to pieces. The awakened trio just let the old-timer give the capsule a shot, but they did not expect a normal human to actually wake the artifact up. After unleashing his last slash, Gyu did not dare take his eyes away from the capsule as it finally gave in and opened a mini rift in the middle of the road. Not prepared to engage in actual combat against monsters coming from the rift, the newbie trio started freaking out. Instead of getting into formation to get ready for what happens after a rift opens, the three were actually the first ones to start running away in fear. They ran as fast and as far as they could as a figure of a monster started emerging from within the bright blue rift. Gyu's mind was running a mile a minute as he observed a head shaped like an ancient statue. At first, he thought the monster coming out was the troublesome dancer type. But upon complete exit, he was positive that this monster was a necromancer type, similar to the one from the factory mission. Instead of cowering like the new school hunters, Park Gyu came in swinging with his dual axe. With fast and accurate successive slashes, he dismembered the necromancer's limbs one by one. His fighting style was perfect for this fight, as these types of monsters cannot deploy their force fields at zero distance. He was well aware of the fact that thousands of spike arms would emerge from the severed parts that he cut off. It might look intimidating, but this was part of the plan as he ran into the thorny arms without the fear of getting caught up. All he had to do was gamble on his life and get as close as he could to deliver a single fatal swing of his axe to decapitate the necromancer in a bloody blaze of glory. And that was precisely what he did. The awakened trio watched with aghast expressions from afar. Nonchalantly, Park Gyu turned around and ordered the kids to quickly clear the barricade so he could go on his way. Park Gyu turned around to stare coldly at the newly awakened hunters, like the real G that he was, as the necromancer disintegrated. Seeing that they were stunned by his show of dominance, he urged them to wake up and move. These greenhorns could not believe that a mere human did what Gyu did without any weapons. Panicking about their promise to accompany Gyu to his destination if he could deal with the problem, the awakened started pushing the promise to one another before the oldest of them all took the job. This guy could also be considered an old schooler, someone even more senior than Gyu himself. As for the rest of the newbies, it would do them some good to study the monster's corpse. And so, Gyu hopped in the car with the old head, driving to the director's funeral service. The old head did not have to chaperone Gyu personally, but he did it anyway. He was actually glad that Gyu shut those brats up. Those level 3s with no field experience kept calling him an old man. You see, awakened abilities are measured in levels. The difference in abilities between those levels is staggering, to say the least. At levels 1 to 4, simple supernatural abilities like sensing and clairvoyance come into play, while physical abilities remain the same. Levels 5 to 9 include abilities like force fields, telekinesis, and direct physical force. At these stages, abilities become practical for combat situations. And then there's the realm of the extremely rare awakened, the ones who reach level 10 and beyond. At that point, they are way past the realm and limits of humanity. The insurmountable gap makes them akin to a different species, so the old head was glad that those level 3s got put in their place. Based on Gyu's assessment of the man, he could have done the same thing himself. The old head did not deny that he would have around a 65% chance of dispatching the monster by himself. He just did not want to get hurt and get into big trouble. He did not want to see his daughter and wife cry at the sight of his recklessness. Back when he was single, nothing else mattered to him. If something went wrong, it was just him. But now that he's a family man, the fear of losing has become too terrifying. So he just shuts up and endures. It had been a while since he got to get these sentiments off his chest. So the old head was glad that someone who could understand listened to his musings. The drive went on without a hitch, and Gyu was dropped off in the middle of a barren city. Old head gave him one last piece of advice: to be extra careful now that director Lee Sang-hoon was dead. He wanted to believe that politics had nothing to do with him, but he had some friends in the National Committee. He's linked to this whether he liked it or not. When people start passing the buck to save their own skins, you never know what they might do, especially in a world without dignity like the one they all live in. The warning echoed in Gyu's mind. Maybe he really should move carefully. Entering one of the buildings, he was greeted with eerie silence. He walked to a hallway where the sole room with lights on was located. Inside was the director's portrait surrounded by flowers, his final resting place. Gyu looked at his old friend and gave a polite greeting as if this were a normal meeting. He asked why the funeral was in a hidden location, which was difficult for everyone to find. By Gyu's side was the only other person at the funeral, Kim Daram. She stated that the higher-ups named the Jeju relocation plan the Lee Sang-hoon plan in memory of the director. It might be a little distasteful, but Daram also believed that such a plan was necessary for the country. Since the intensity of a rift is proportional to population size, the rifts on Jeju Island are relatively weak. Geographically, it's a lot easier to defend too. Gyu reckoned that the commission was probably planning to consolidate South Korea's power and resources on the island for a more secure future. The only flaw in the plan was the abandonment of countless survivors relying on the remains of a government. He knew that the director could not handle this massive overhaul by himself, but they were making it out to be a one-man responsibility. Since the plan was to abandon 10 million people in the capital, the commission had to use someone as the sacrificial lamb to quell public opinion. They must have pinned everything on the director, the most junior person involved in making the decision. Daram knew Sang-hoon to be an incredibly stubborn man. On her wedding day, that same guy came to her wedding with a 30,000 won cash gift when the minimum back then was 50,000. That story made Gyu laugh as he could picture Sang-hoon being out of touch so vividly. Daram also wanted to tell Gyu about the events that happened before the director passed away. Moments before his demise, someone came to see the director on the day the Jeju Island relocation plan was finalized. Just before, the two old rivals spoke on the phone. They talked about how someone had to do the dirty work, and that someone wouldn't be the people at the top or those at the bottom. It would need to be someone detached from the present while staring coldly into the future. One would have to weigh the lives of 10 million people against the future of all humanity. It sure as hell wasn't an easy choice to make. The man who visited Sang-hoon outrightly told him that this was what they needed him to do. He was being given the opportunity to do what even the professor could not accomplish. Although the plan seemed solid, the director was still skeptical about whether there really was a future on Jeju Island. Han Min, the mysterious glasses-wearing man in his office, just smiled silently. None of them knew what would happen for sure, but Han Min looked excited to find out soon enough. The mention and involvement of Kang Han Min in the Lee Sang-hoon plan made Gyu stop in his tracks. All colors drained from his face. Daram added that Han Min said something before he left that day. The bastard explicitly said that old schoolers wouldn't be needed on Jeju Island. Changing the subject, Daram defeatedly asked Gyu if he still had room in his bunker. Just one look at her miserable state, and he could feel that the world was about to collapse once more. Looking at her sent Gyu's mind back to a time when Daram was still a field hunter under his wing. He remembered entering the hospital room where his troops were trying their best to make a full recovery. The injured hunters stood at attention as they saluted their team leader, Park Gyu, with utmost respect. He scanned the entire room with his hawk-like eyes. On one side were men with crutches and neck braces. On the other were the same old injuries. Gyu stood in the middle of the hunters who looked up to him and announced that those who had been injured should just leave his team. He believed that on the battlefield, an incompetent ally could be more dangerous than a capable enemy. Gyu had seen countless people and soldiers die pointless deaths, unable to fight properly because of weak and incompetent losers like the ones in this hospital room. The team leader simply didn't want to see that kind of scene anymore. Before leaving, he urged his team to judge their injuries for themselves and leave voluntarily according to severity. The silence was broken by the tears of one of the hunters. He just could not do this anymore. They had just suffered a massive loss, and the leader's announcement made it worse. The hunter turned to Kim Daram, urging her to quit together before they lost their minds serving under a lunatic leader. Daram assuredly refused. It might have hurt their pride, but what the leader said was the truth. She knew she had fallen behind due to her injuries. But Daram was not a quitter. She would gladly grit her teeth and endure the pain to the end. Her motivation was to throw those poisonous words right back in Park Gyu's face. At that time, Kim Daram was still a person with an overwhelmingly strong fighting spirit, fit for a soldier like Gyu. But now, here she was, bargaining with him for a space in his bunker. She didn't even need a big space. She wouldn't even go herself. Daram just wanted her son to have a safe place to go. Today, the Kim Daram was far from the Daram he used to know. After the conversation at the funeral service, Gyu sat around in the lobby, thinking. Daram's pleading continued to echo in his mind. She was begging to get her son to safety, even promising money. She was at the epicenter of what was happening. Seoul was on the verge of riots every day, and she could not possibly leave her child in a place that could start a civil war on a dime. If something happened to her son, she would not know what to do anymore. Upon careful consideration, Gyu's final answer was no. He reckoned that he would have to refuse. With the current atmosphere, this situation might not just end as a simple riot. If the military force got involved and it devolved into a straight-up civil war, the situation would undoubtedly drag on for a while. When that happens, Gyu can't function as an indefinite daycare center, taking care of someone else's son. While he was lost in thought, a man entered the lobby. He wore an ordinary cap and hoodie. Nothing about him stood out from the crowd. Gyu heard the man mention to the front desk that he was a junior of director Lee Sang-hoon, Hong Jung-ho of Guard Batch 18. The personnel granted Jung-ho access to the funeral room on the second basement level. Then this guy started asking for spare medicine, citing his sick younger sister as an excuse. The personnel just reprimanded him for demanding something so scarce these days. The sketchy request for meds made the personnel suspicious, and they wanted a deeper background check on Jung-ho before Gyu intervened. Gyu name-dropped the director and the commissioner, and then demanded the medicine Jung-ho asked for. Just like that, the young man got his bag of meds and thanked Gyu from the bottom of his heart. Gyu asked the young man if he really was acquainted with the director, and Jung-ho confessed that he wasn't. He was just hoping that name-dropping an official would get him the medicine. You see, the 18th batch he listed as the one he belonged to was filled with awakeners. From this class onward, non-powered graduates had no future as field hunters anymore. No matter how much experience they had, non-awakeners were hardly ever deployed to the front lines against monsters. They were mostly relegated to dirty work in the reserves until they were cast aside. The juniors were awakeners with supernatural powers, while their seniors were old-school veterans with rich field experience. Stuck between the new and old eras, the 18th batch was known as the Cursed class. Right now, you won't find any proper meds on the market other than painkillers or fever meds. In a bit of desperation, Jung-ho tried to worm his way into this National Committee-managed central hospital. If he had not done so, his younger sister would have been in danger. The two exited the facility, and Jung-ho expressed his gratitude to his hunter senior once more. They went on their own way, and Jung-ho's expression turned lax. He walked toward his car, where a girl was sitting, and lamented that the operation didn't work. But they got the meds. Jung-ho was actually digging for information about the committee's plan to withdraw, but he couldn't get into the funeral where the info could be. More importantly, he wanted to share something that happened inside the hospital that was hard to believe. Jung-ho proudly proclaimed that he met Skeleton, Park Gyu's forum username. With his proclamation came the muzzle of a gun aimed at the back of his head. Gyu was on the other side of the trigger. He calmly quipped that at least their conversation would go quickly. He stoically ordered Jung-ho to put his hands up and put the bag down. If Gyu was not mistaken, the man he was aiming at was none other than the infamous Defender. Hearing Gyu call him out, Defender raised his hands in surrender. He slowly turned around and sped up in a split second to disarm Gyu effectively. Without batting an eye, Gyu paid attention to every single muscle twitch. Unfortunately, Defender was fast enough to turn the tables around and aim the gun right back at Gyu. In the middle of talking, Gyu swiped the gun away, disarming the man that disarmed him. The Defender watched as the nonchalant man dove headfirst to the side. He was actually diving to retrieve the falling gun to regain the upper hand. As soon as he got his hands on that trigger, he aimed at the Defender to the best of his abilities. He was too slow. Defender was already cocking in a kick to take the gun out of the equation. He was not able to deliver a bullet to the murderer's flesh as his hand got kicked with brutal force. The gun flew farther this time around, leaving the hunters in melee combat. The Defender calmly assessed the situation, only to see Park Gyu coming in with his fist as if he were a disturbed wild beast. This was a battle of nonchalant fighters. Gyu's fist made contact, sending Defender hurtling backward painfully. Before losing balance, he managed to grab Gyu's sleeves. Using that support, he launched a counterattack of his own, making Gyu dodge hastily. The battle of quick thinking had devolved into a boxing match between two ferocious infighters. Gyu proved to be a better strategic fighter, as he sent a perfect counter over the enemy's shoulder. It clocked Defender on the jaw, knocking the murderer down. He laughed and praised Skeleton for being so strong. Gyu did not waste any words. Instead of engaging with Defender, he walked to grab the gun back up. With the pistol in hand, he just stared at the man who had been terrorizing the forums for as long as he could remember. The Defender stood up and sneakily took out a hidden blade. I'm not sure how he got it there without stabbing himself in the ass. The murderer accepted the challenge, but he wanted to make the second round a temp match. The Defender noticed something. Gyu was actually aiming the gun perfectly. If a stray shot went off in their current position, the bullet would undoubtedly hit the girl in the car. Considering that risk, Defender dropped his nasty blade and raised his hand in surrender again. He insisted that he was just kidding just then. The infamous Defender would rather...
I think you kinda like this video, so just subscribe and like.